Mic on. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another BAE live stream. Today we've got VESA with us. We're going to be exploring a lot of different topics about crypto art and just kind of the general feeling around everything at the moment. So, first of all, VESA, how are you?
I'm really good. Good to see you, Sasha.
It's really good to see you too. We've got a new setup as well, as you can see. I've made like a nice little frame thing. You can't actually see it. Let me move me so I'm not in the way on your screen. There we go. So let's get started with the first question, which is just the standard one of kind of how did you get into art? How did you get to where you are today? What brought you into the art world?
I suppose to a certain degree I was born with it. I turned my parents' pots and pans into a drum kit when I was 5 years old, I think, and these wooden spatulas sort of became the drumsticks and rhythm, even up until now, is probably one of the cores of how to come about with creativity or timing and pace and all those kinds of things. But music was my very first love. And when I was a teenager, I had some bands and played the guitar and went about it sort of that way. But I didn't dare to dream that could maybe be what I was going to do with my life. And my parents were very much more towards go to business school and make a viable living and don't become a punk type type deal. So it was quite a struggle. And there was this funny episode when actually, in hindsight, it's a very privileged position for your parents to try and force you to become someone who's going to be financially independent very early and those kind of things. But I just knew that money wasn't my first priority. And I was already into Photoshop. I was already into movies. I was thinking about maybe I could have a career in advertising. There was a bunch of things that I was circling around when I was about 18 years old and got out of high school. And my mom even tried to get me to go into business school by buying this course that I needed to go on. And I had this Chinese toga on. I had a couple of beers before going into the first day. And when I went to sit at the back. And there was a professor at the front, and he asked me, well, not me personally, but everyone. So who here has read all of these three books more than three times? And I didn't have a clue of what those books even were. So I felt like a fish out of water. And then I just sort of excused myself after a while to go to the toilet, but I took my bag with me. And luckily, apparently, my mom got her money back to about the business course because I literally was there for about an hour before I left and went to another bar, I guess. Yeah, that was early days. But movies became the thing. I started making independent films when I was about 19 and fought through that whole thing, went to apprentice in film production companies and then eventually got into film school and long story, then got frustrated with it all and became a contemporary artist by inventing a method of my own, starting to body paint on people and then photographing and putting it together with Photoshop and digitally. And so for, relevance to crypto art, I suppose, is that for 12 years I've been making high resolution digital originals of which there are now about 350 ready to be tokenized. But ironically, even the majority of my contemporaries still think that I'm a traditional painter. Because in a sense, I think I just did too good of a job for people to think that what it is that I'm doing is normal paintings. Because I utilize paint, but in fact, it's all digital and as the sort of result. But then I do make them into physical copies and
So
variety of
let's
ways.
step back just a little bit. So you did independent filmmaking. If I'm right, you made a documentary based on the financial system and Bitcoin. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
I got
Is that correct?
I got red pilled around 2006 of how money works, and obviously it was one of those um, really big moments because I saw the very first zeitgeist film, and you can think of what of the other conspiratorial elements of that film, whatever you like, but it sort of showed how money comes into existence, and that's something that has held water ever since then, even by major economists and people who I trusted and who were experts, even, that I started questioning that, because at that point I was already an entrepreneur and I had some friends who were working in the finance industry and things like that. So I knew who to ask the questions of. And when they either couldn't answer, they sort of went blank, or then they sort of admitted that, yeah, this is part of how this whole thing works. And it was a peculiar moment in time, because I'd taken a business loan. I'd become an entrepreneur. I have my own production company at that point. And then sort of on the one hand, I became a money activist. And then on the other hand, an entrepreneur, and what that results in is a human being that has their foot on the brake and the gas simultaneously, because it's almost like an impossible equation. So this is why ultimately crypto and crypto art has become such an important and powerful force in my life, is that I'm able to be in alignment as a human being, as someone who wants to do good in the world, someone who wants to monetize and do well in entrepreneurship, but as well as do helpful and good things to people, so we get more freedom and sort of happiness in our lives. And for even normal people right now, when they're looking at the finance system, most people are starting to wake up that there's something pretty fishy going on in here.
So you've been in crypto and kind of, well, I'd say blockchain, because crypto is kind of a very is what crypto art's kind of coined. But you've been in blockchain sector longer than most artists. So how did that kind of come to be? Because I think you're one of the first artists, as far as I know, to kind of take advantage of the circuit and kind of going to the crypto spaces. I mean, there's Kevin Abosch as well, but you're definitely one of the first that I've seen that was kind of around. How did that come about?
Well, one of the reasons why it's been kind of easy to get to know a lot of the OGs of the space is that because I was sort of a part of this whole money war trenches ever since 2006, I've been around for longer than many of the OGs have. So in one sense, that was a natural thing. But a little bit of a long story short, there was a guy called Risto here in Finland who was one of the whales of Bitcoin and got in very, very early and bought large amounts, and even bought a castle eventually in Estonia with his Bitcoin. And he was quite the character in many ways, and revelatory Christian. And he was also being accused of a bunch of very unsavory things here in the press at the time. And I really, even though Bitcoin probably otherwise would have been a very interesting thing, because of this guy, I was kind of put off by being a part of it at that time, to my own detriment, unfortunately. But in the summer or spring or summer of 2017, I went for a coffee with a friend of mine in London, living there, and he came out of the crypto investor closet, if you will, and said that, hey, listen, this is what I do, and I just paid myself for a full year yesterday, and I've been trying to look for a decent crypto art piece on my wall for 4 days online, and I couldn't find anything that is even halfway decent. So I have him to thank for that whole thing, because he said that, he knew about my history and my values and things like that, what I've been involved in. And he said, hey, listen, you really need to look into this now, that I think there is something important here. And it was more or less something like 8 days from that conversation that I had artforcrypto.com, as well as the first art piece on there called Pushback, which was about the market. And it's become such a, open highway. So many things were very frustrating before that moment. And then all of a sudden when that hit, it was like the world opened up, and I'm ever so grateful to be a part of it. So it's the short story.
No, it's really interesting how you got there. And what is the documentary you made about the financial system? Where can people find it?
Well, it's unfortunately, to most people listening here, it's not much of use, because it's in the Finnish language, and it's essentially the Zeitgeist Addendum is the second part of the Zeitgeist series, and it's almost one-to-one the English version of the Zeitgeist film, the second one.
Okay.
And we just didn't, we left out the majority of all the different kind of conspiracy theories about the Twin Towers and religions and whatever. And we just went, here's the monetary system, here's how it works. This is Jacques Fresco. We hung out with him for 4 days in Stockholm when he was doing a lecture over there. And then we just put it together with my production company and some independent people. And then we released it for free. And Finland is only about, I guess, 5 million people or something like that. And we managed to get about 300,000 downloads for that film alone, and a bunch of interested folks. So it did make a cultural impact, but the whole point was that Finnish people would hear in their own language of what this whole thing is about, because it was already out there in English and it had been seen by like a 250 million people or something like that. So there wasn't much point to be making the English version. But of course, for those watching, the majority of people in the world don't speak Finnish. So even if it's called ajan henki, which is the spirit of the time. So it is on YouTube. I think at least one of those versions is still up there, but it was early 2011 or late 2010 that we pushed out the very first version.
Nice. That's early on the kind of the space. So when was it that you properly got into Bitcoin? What year were you became part of the movement?
It was summer 2017.
Okay.
That's when I started making the art pieces. Soon after that, News BTC came in. They allowed me to start writing on their channel about creativity, because it's mostly about price prediction, even still today. And it's not a maxi channel, even though people might think so, because it's BTC only. But it's been a positive thing, because it's allowed me to help other artists. I can publish my own things direct to the market, and of course bring a very different point of view to the whole space than especially up until then it was all about, because it was mostly about engineers and coders and tech stuff. So it was a water-breaking moment, and because of those articles, I think it was the first hedge fund that collected a major piece from me, and that went to Barcelona. That got me funded to go to Miami for the North American Bitcoin conference, and that was just an amazing thing, because that was at the height, or just before the crash of the previous bull market, and it was that moment of being not only in Miami for the first time, but there were about 4,000 people in a conference room, utterly packed, and you could just it felt like you could charge your phone off the electricity of the air of how excited people were around that time over there, and the deals being made and the parties and the whole thing. It was just such a mesmerizing thing, and of course that was the first time I got properly scammed as well. So,
so tell me about that. What happened there? Because that's always an interesting subject.
I can't really go into the details of that.
It's too painful.
But I did get fucked over. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to, and that leads me into the next question. Is actually before that, going back a little bit, is why create digital art in the first place? What led you? And we spoke a little bit about it, but what led you to the kind of idea of taking body painting, and then redigitizing that, and then creating that as kind of high fidelity, high gloss artworks? Well,
originally it was a lack of skill in terms of being able to paint. I just thought that, because going very, very back, it was, I think I was about maybe 12 years old or something, like 11 years old. I was in class and we were doing drawing. I don't know what it's called in English, like just the arts, I suppose, education. And we always did watercolors, and I hated them because they're so bland and the paper was wet.
Always told to copy someone as well. Like, you never get to express yourself outside of the very confined boundaries in school.
To this day, I fucking hate watercolors. And basically, I was having to do a watercolor, and then I was probably thinking of a drum beat in my head or something like that. And the teacher came and was very sort of a powerful figure on the up like this and looking down at the thing that I did. I just said, well, obviously, you have no talent in painting whatsoever.
It sounds very Nordic the way you put it that way.
Yeah, but I had to agree. I mean, I looked at what was in front of me, and I was like, yeah, it's a piece of shit. I mean, I don't really care for it. But that sort of got me this whole circus going on in my head. That's my dog, by the way.
I know,
That's
I
why
saw
there's
him
such
kind
a
of popping around in the background a little bit.
he's always washing his balls when I'm doing an interview, which is helpful. So yeah, so I agreed. So I did a bunch of different creativity, from writing to photography to film to all these different things. But I always had this thing in the back of my head: I can't paint, I can't paint. And obviously, I couldn't paint because I hadn't done any of it. But then I realized that, hold on a minute, if I had someone who I would body paint, I could direct them, I could tell a story, I could photograph them, I could Photoshop, I could light, I could print them into work. So I could maybe make something happen that I haven't seen before if I do it this way. And lo and behold, I found this very crazy and cool lady called Sophia, who became my first model. And we just had an experimentative photo session where her body was painted, and she was a very expressive, kind of liberated human, I suppose, in many different ways. And it was just, when I saw the first piece in front of me that I called The Escapist, it was like my whole life changed. I didn't want to be a filmmaker anymore. I didn't want to have a production company. I just sort of still had bills to pay, and then I got ill, and it was a whole ordeal altogether. But as soon as I saw that first piece, I was like, this is what I'm doing now. And that's 12 years ago, and I'm on that road ever since.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. So it's your artwork's kind of a combination. I was showing it quickly. I don't want to get like the stream taken down or anything, so I kind of covered the nipples with my mouse as I was going. Um, but
Oh, it's been actually fine. No one's
really?
ever taken down any of my
YouTube?
work ever anywhere. Yeah,
Oh, well,
no,
okay.
not even
Okay,
Facebook.
fantastic. I'm a
No,
bit nervous, but
no,
I
nowhere.
think it should be fine. I'm gonna show it. But so your artwork is kind of a combination of photography, body painting, Photoshop, and how many different processes are in there?
Well, it starts from the story. I mean, I got along the way educated as a hypnotherapist as well in NLP,
Oh wow! How
and the
many?
whole
Sorry
point
to
was to.
interrupt, but how many qualifications do you have? You said you did business. How many different things do you know? To put it in like a.
I'm just a sponge of a brain, I guess. I just, in terms of academically official stuff, I just got a BA in media production, which is a measly thing. But in terms of getting into very, very interesting fields and meeting a bunch of interesting people, and especially through filmmaking, I was drawn to interesting individuals who have something to say or to contribute. So I'm just on a continuous learning curve. I think all my learning really started when I discovered audiobooks right after graduating university, and then I realized what a scam the whole schooling system was when I got introduced to information that was truly unfiltered by a, what you would call these big motions or power structures in the world. All of a sudden, the inspiration that I was looking for was just right there in front of me, and that kind of information highway opened with the internet and audiobooks, which leads me to a bunch of stuff that I have to say about crypto art and the
Yeah,
drama motions that are going on at the
hold
moment.
on. Let's. Where are we right now? We're going to move that question about Vina to the end. So yeah, perfect. What do you think about what do you think of crypto art? Was the next question as we're getting to that stage.
Well, I actually prepared a little bit of a thing. I even have it on notes here next to me, because I always want to, because this is really precious to me. Like, you giving me time and us chatting here and people listening to this thing. I don't want to just
And
sort
if
of
anyone out
talk
there
about.
has any questions for VESA, just put them in the chat. We'll get to them towards the end of the stream.
Very cool.
Yeah.
But important that you know that I really appreciate this, and because I appreciate these kinds of things, I always try and have something new to say. And this time there's about 10 minutes of it at least,
No,
and
no,
this
go
is
ahead. I mean,
where it's going. And
the longer we talk, the more YouTube will promote the video. So let's see if we can make it past Robness's and mine hour and a half we did last time.
cool, because this is very, very, this is good for artists, crypto artists, of course, but artists in general, but also collectors, and the whole worldview that it's embedded in terms of creativity and where we're at. And I retweeted your thing that we're about to start this live stream in a little bit of a provocative way by just saying that this crypto art drama that is currently going on among the artists
Yeah.
is a lot to do with cowardice and ignorance. But it might
Sorry,
not
sorry.
be what you think.
What?
Cowardice and ignorance.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah.
And as provoking as that might be, I'm going to try in about 10 minutes to unpack what it is that I
So
truly mean.
just
Because
can we just provide a little bit before we get there, a little bit of context for people who aren't in the crypto art community and maybe are just seeing this from the outside.
sure, yeah.
There's quite a lot of tea spilling going on. I guess that's what they call it. But I feel like it's a clash of personalities. Just to put it in a nutshell, I guess it's like any Twitter community. Once you come into it, there's quite a lot of big personalities. But maybe what you're going to say is probably going to frame it a little bit better. I'll just let you take the stage.
Oh, sure, but I think it's less to do with personality. I think it's a lot to do with, money to begin with is one thing, but a lack of education in a certain kind of thing, and also direction. And what I might mean by that is that if you define artists a little bit commercially first, is that they're kind of like startups without funding, and for years and years, very likely without a viable product. So that alone, to anyone who's an entrepreneur or economist or anyone coming out from the outside in, that tells you just how much of a desperate field it is, and it's very, very, very hard to commercialize to begin with in order for anyone to make a living out of. So. And then artists tend to be people who don't like reality that much. They tend to want to try and get away from it, and that in part is their force, is that they want to get to these fantastic things, and sort of their imaginations are wild, but that also leads to a lot of delusion as well as ideological possession, and that's in part part of the problem. And if you think of someone like, let's say, Van Gogh, he undoubtedly
He sounds like he would have been an awful man to be around.
just a genius and an utter catastrophe. And the catastrophe is that he's a genius in a very, very narrow scope of how he saw the world and how he could paint it. But he was certainly not good at forming relationships. He didn't understand finance or economy to save his life. He couldn't get, like, all of these very, very important other things about life that you need to be at least mediocre at, he was terrible at. And then, of course, as part of that package, because if you're not very good at something, you tend to avoid it, and then you can easily get radicalized like he did. I mean, he, on top of everything else of how difficult it is to try and make a living as an artist, he started to idolize field workers. So for those who the least gave a shit about what he was doing, he was making his heroes. So the whole package of what comes together as a sort of guilt of trying to get his money off of his brother then, and all of these different things, is just a sociological nightmare altogether, what's going on over there. And so artists in general don't have, especially financial education. They're not very good at making deals, and they don't like to sort of talk brass tacks in a certain kind of sense. So when you get to like in crypto, you need to start making these things happen with conferences, or you need to talk to companies or businesses, and all of a sudden there's a hedge fund who might be interested in your work or something like that, and then you don't have any common language whatsoever, and you're ill prepared when an opportunity comes your way, and then you screw it up, and then you're even more pissed because you almost made a living and then you couldn't make it happen, and all those kind of things. So and of course, crypto art, on top of everything else, if it truly is crypto art, it has a sense of danger to it. So already commercial interests and sort of corporate timelines and perspectives can be a little wary of what it is that you're doing and those kinds of things. But to go back a little bit, when I went to film school, and this is in 2000, we were sort of shown a film that was pretty much a shopping trolley full of products set on fire, thrown off of a roof of a shopping mall. And that was triumphed as the thing that is the coolest thing that we could possibly be doing. And so anything commercial, anything thing like that was very much frowned upon. It was the new wave of the French films and the 15-minute camera tracking moves of cars in a row. And I was just going, what the fuck is going on here? The whole thing was because I had some commercial
and this was in media
experience.
Studies, is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was very much Marxist indoctrination. Indoctrination. It was the whole of the 3 years, and of
Yeah.
course, it expanded my sort of intellect in a certain kind of sense. But it also like ruined a whole, I don't know, probably generations of filmmakers
No,
in a certain
definitely.
kind of sense.
I
Because now,
think, if I can just quickly interject, I think one of the problems with school is it doesn't teach people how to accrue capital. It teaches people how to do things that they love, and that's really important. But I think that there's a huge thing missing when a school doesn't prepare you for the real world. I mean, I think that's why so many people hate the capitalist system, because they weren't taught how to actually work within it. And I think that that's kind of and I think that that's a huge disservice that the education system does to artists, as they kind of teach them how things ought to be, not how things are.
very, completely agree. And on top of that, one of the weirdest things is that then at the same time you're full of conspiracies and not trusting any institutions while wanting all the institutions to have all the power. So the ultimate thing is that you don't trust any authority, and then you're saying, but the authority should have all the central power to so it's such a ideological mess of at the same time, again, the foot on the gas and the brake at the same time, and wondering why you're not really going anywhere. You might feel depressed. uh,
Yeah.
it's not the best. So I kind of like what I saw in film school was not only that was the ideology, and but because I had some commercial background, I knew how to approach it a little bit suspiciously, because I knew that there was a real world I will be going into. So I wasn't so hell bent on trying to get brownie points from the teachers, because I knew they were wrong about where we were going to be going. I already knew that part, so I protected myself a little bit from that. And out of my class, I mean, just imagine, it was I think it was about 1,500 students who applied to be on that course. It was a really high sort of in demand course, and there was about 30 of us who got in. And I think from my class, there's 2 or maximum 3 that are still working in a creative field. And all the tuition or whatever, it's a nightmare. But what I also saw in the school is that course had been running for about 20, 30 years or something like that. And next to us, we were going to be filmmakers. So there were actors, there were musicians, there were fine artists, there were all the kinds of things that a filmmaker would need were in our building or the building next to us. And the course hadn't set up any kind of communication in between us whatsoever. And I was like, what? Like, isn't this your job to see that we're meant to be talking to one another and doing this kind of thing? So, but again, because that's seen as a commercial activity or push it or whatever it is, then that's frowned upon in a certain kind of sense. So I took, even already in film school, I took a lot of flack because I was kind of just forcing these things to then happen, because we obviously, if you're not doing this, then I'll make it happen. So instead of getting support from my professors for that, I kind of got yeah, you can think of how that went.
Yeah.
Scrolling much further into a similar kind of topic, and this is where I think this crypto artist drama can start to unravel if you adopt this kind of perspective. But because, for example, I was headlining Art Decentralized in Miami in 2018, which was a whole event with a bunch of crypto artists, and it cost me $5,000 to be able to be the headlining artist, and that was paid by someone who's a benefactor of mine that I had to pay back over a year's time. Then, because actually that whole thing was a shit show. It was so unprofessionally done, even though it gave all the impressions and whatever. So
weirdly, I was actually in Miami at the same time, and I got approached for that, but we didn't take up the offer. It's weird. We kind of crossed paths before we met.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Good for you. Well done. I didn't know that part, unfortunately. But well, it still eventually led to some good things. But that was like, it's been such a journey altogether. But thinking that again, the same phenomena that was going on there. That it was sort of a conference, and you had panels, you had people speaking, you had this and that, and then we break for lunch, and people are meant to be socializing. What I saw on the yard there, where everyone was eating, was that all of a sudden the investors were in one table, and again the artists were in another table, and no one was talking to one another. And I was very respectful to the other artists, and I met Johnny Dollar there, that was cool, and a bunch of other things, and I was loving being Miami. But I just said, hey, listen, this is not what I'm here for. I've got a financial responsibility to be making sure that I'm talking to these finance people in order for them to invest into my art and this thing to continue. So I just sort of said, hey, and then I started going into meeting these people to make stuff happen, and this is a part of the problem of the whole of the art world, as well as the sort of very limited point of view of how things work. And like you were saying, why things aren't working for many people, because they don't understand how this system works to
People are
begin with.
nervous to just walk up to someone sometimes. I mean, I even saw it in businesses that are supposed to be about networking. People are nervous to just walk up and say hi and give their business card. I think it's less of a problem maybe in the US. I think it's more of a European issue. But people lack the confidence to even just go up to people and say, "Hi, this is my name. This is what I do, and here is my card. I'd be really interested in getting involved in what you're doing." It's amazing how many people find it difficult to even do that basic level of networking.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I mean when I started this whole thing by it's a combination of cowardice as well as ignorance, and maybe not in that order. Maybe ignorance first of how it works, of what it is that you're meant to be doing and where you're meant to be putting your energy into. But then it's cowardice in a way that I've seen it far too many times, that the artist who might have something to offer to people doesn't go and offer it to those people because they might he feels like, or she feels like, they don't have the similar language, or it's kind of like dating. You go to a bar and then all of a sudden you see someone you like, but you kind of cowered out of going to even talk to them because you can't really hunt.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem, and I think that is the very predictable thing when in crypto art there was a certain kind of circle jerk that started happening very, very quickly, that the artists are talking to one another and they're patting each other in the back and they're wanting to make sure that all like one another and this kind of a thing, which is ever so natural, because every time there is a new thing that happens, you need to form a natural hierarchy. You need to see who is who and who's really good at something, who's not, and who's coming up, and these kinds of things. And it's great in a certain kind of sense, but given what the premise is, how we're coming into this whole thing, it was very predictably seen that this is going to end up in an utter nightmare.
Yeah.
So this is where probably also most misunderstood by the crypto art community is that ever since the beginning, my communication when I'm on Twitter or anywhere, I talk to potentially those people who might be investing or buying or helping or conference, whatever it is. I'm not talking to the other artists. But this, of course, is something...
People tend to take that in the wrong way, but I really think that people, at the same time as being like, we need to expand this market, we all just end up talking to each other. That's why I've kind of stepped back from Twitter, because I feel like it may even be the Twitter algorithm has put us in an echo chamber, and it doesn't really let our tweets reach the outside. We all just end up speaking to each other, because I know that was... I watched a Joe Rogan podcast about with Jack Dorsey, and he did mention that they were changing it to be more focused on basically putting people into bubbles. So your community shall never reach out to this other community because you might offend them, or something like that, which it definitely seems to be the case.
Fucking safe space, people.
Yes. I think that's kind of what it pertains to, because it's weird. I'm sure I've only been on Twitter thankfully since the beginning of the year, but it really does seem like it's not got the exposure and the reach that it used to, and all the social medias feel like that. Like when you go onto one of the new ones, and you're just on there for a little bit, and there's actually usership. For instance, I was using Parler for a little while. I got bored because no one's on there. But I mean, there are people on there, but I noticed that your reach would be far greater than it is on Twitter just for tweeting out normal things. So I feel like there is something in they're trying to limit. They're trying to keep these little circles.
And that's how art doesn't grow. That's how the artists don't grow. That's how it becomes like a thing that is eating itself. Because right now, if your focus as an artist are the other artists, what the hell else could it be than utter drama or backstabbing or rumors and all of whatever? Because all things considered, it's such a difficult thing to make a living. And if you're, no matter how dreamy you are or how talented you are, if your whole life is a mess, you're not making any money, you don't have good relationships, you live in a shithole, you have all of these things that are working against you, you can't be a very good human being to your peers. If you're not doing very well, you can't be a good person.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, or at least so. It's like a superhero feature that shouldn't be asked of anyone. So in order to unpack this is just a change of direction. Is that one of the cool things about crypto is that it gave me such a positive direction towards money, starting to like money, because the whole thing about
it's
the
nice to have it and feel like it's yours. That's what I like about crypto. It's as silly as a lot of people who aren't into it will be like, "What? It's just on the computer," and it's like, no, but it feels more mine than any money has ever felt mine. Cash, whatever. Like I know this is my money. I'm in control of it, and I can do what I want with it. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about centralized governments. I mean, I do have to worry about internet connection, which is kind of odd, but other than that, it's pretty freeing.
saving,
Yeah.
wanting to know, understand about investing, wanting to be fiscally responsible because you have a system that is working for you as opposed to against you.
Yeah.
And that's such a what a what a dream. It feels like I'm already living in the future that other people are only hearing about. It's like and then it's also simultaneously frustrating because there are a bunch of really talented people that I know from the, let's call it, the legacy world, who would benefit from being a part of this whole thing, but because their indoctrination to these central systems is so incredibly strong, that I've sort of given up on those kinds of things, and I just do what I do. And if there's someone who sort of starts to realize that, holy, there's something going on here, then welcome to follow. But I'm no longer fishing for people to get out of the water.
Well, no, I mean our
Okay,
job on our side is to try and get people into it as much as we can. But it is hard. Some people, especially artists, some people just have this weird block where they will not even consider crypto. They think of it as this kind of, they instantly just think scams or Bitcoin. Still obsessed with the idea of the Silk Road and all of this sort of stuff, which is, in my opinion, I think that the Silk Road is for all the bad that people think it did. I think that it was an amazing demonstration of what people can do when they have full control over their money, and I actually think that that's all part of the beauty. Because like it or not, there was a lot of harm reduction done by that, and I think there's measurable harm reduction done by that. But I'm not endorsing anything like that. But at the same time, anyway, sorry, we were talking. I cut you off a little bit. We were talking about the drama in the crypto world, and how do you think that it relates? Getting back to that.
No, I suppose the whole of the crypto is full of drama in a certain kind of sense. So I'm just advocating for balance in many ways. It's not like I lack strong points of views, but I try and say them in a way that it's mostly helpful to the thing. I try and be the adult in the room. I don't always succeed, which is
Me too.
obvious,
I
obviously
recently,
clear.
I've had all sorts of fun labels thrown at me. I'm sure. Oh, you have too. We've all had fun labels thrown at us.
But that's I suppose that's part of the sort of perverse incentive of a lot of different things, that it's very beneficial for some people to throw these things around and be very cavalier about very, very serious things. And that is a real big shame about our time in a certain kind of sense.
I think that extends beyond crypto into the main zeitgeist of the time. That people are very comfortable calling people what really are. I mean, and not to get all sloppy, but genuinely quite hurtful labels that people throw around very, very casually without thinking about it, and they don't think about the repercussions of calling people those things. Because as we saw with the recent Tom Badley drama, it's very easy to label someone, say, a fascist, but it's not. They don't think about the consequences of doing so, like the repercussions into someone's life that can actually cause.
Mm. No, well, but it's that kind of thing is also something that Tom was playing with, some things that very predictably some people were going to get pissed off about, and some of those things are going to be thrown at him. So, I mean, he was playing the controversy card a little bit on that thing as well, and then it's up to him to sort of defend it as well. This is also why I'm so careful with a certain amount of things, because the world itself, even without trying to make controversy, it's already controversial, because simply so many different interests are playing their part. So I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say about those things. I've
No,
got
but
plenty of
what do you
other
think?
things that I need to be fencing off.
No, totally. But what do you think the kind of answer is? I keep getting us a little bit off a track. But what do you think the answer kind of is for the crypto art drama, and how do you think the artists could approach this from a perspective where they might do themselves benefit and do the whole space benefit?
I think this is another kind of misunderstood thing, which is similar to the one of what I was saying, that all my communication is directed at investors and helpers and conference people and all those kinds of things, which was misinterpreted by a lot of crypto artists to begin with as my arrogance, that they thought that I was talking to them and making myself somehow better than them. No, the whole idea is that this is who I am and this is how I'm different and this is how I can benefit the ecosystem at large. Please give me opportunities and I'll come and play ball with you. That was the whole thing. So in a similar kind of sense, it's that it depends on what strengths you're playing with that you come into the field with, and what kind of attitude that you come. Are you here to construct with other people? Are you just trying to be the best and the brightest and make the most money? There's so many different ways that you can do, and I've sort of avoided the majority of the drama in a certain kind of sense, because I haven't gone where it always predictably is. I've tried to craft those avenues, which are somewhat hard to make. It's hard to go to, like imagine just the World CryptoCon. The first year we made our collaboration, they put about $20,000, if not more, into our collaboration so that I could go and do an exhibit and performance and keynote and all of those kinds of things. I think their drink budget was $250,000 at the Aria Hotel in Vegas. And if you go to people like that who are throwing multi-million dollars into a conference and they're taking those kinds of enormous risks, and you want to be that guy in the table who contributes to that conversation and you can hang in that crew, you best make sure that you know what your homework is, what it is that you're contributing, and how hard you've worked in order to deserve to be at that table, should it ever be given to you. So when you're coming into anywhere and you might have an incentive to throw about controversy or, you know, whatever, petrol into whatever kind of fire, and then make a name for yourself very quickly, or do these very trickstery kind of things or whatever it is, just know that might kill your whole thing. Yeah. So in one sense, what I'm advocating is balance and patience, because this is like, my life has been built professionally over 20 years now, and it's finally starting to work. And it's been a very, very painful journey at times, super, super horrible. And most of these insights that I'm now sharing, it took a lot in order for me to get to understand how it works and what it is that I'm now sharing. And hopefully it is helpful to some who want to hear it. But I also know that there are people who already, for reasons, whatever they are, they don't like me. They're not going to take from this what it is that I'm trying to do or contribute or whatever it is. They'll take some part, and then because it works for their interest, if it's good or bad, whatever it is, they'll do their own thing with it. And that's just the nature of today of how things work, and that's their karma, that's their path, and good luck. Do your whatever it is that you do. But this is how I want to approach it. I want to approach individuals. I want to approach constructively. I want this space to succeed, and I want to be a part of its history. In that way, I want to be integrated to it. I just don't like when, let's say, from the legacy system, and that might come from a very super radical left-wing point of view, and they will like because artists do collaborations, and it's just, oh, everyone should collaborate. And then you have two visual artists and they're just collaborate because, you know, that's just the buzz thing of what you do. But the actual collaboration is, what was cool is that you do a collaboration with a musician, because now you can combine both the visual as well as the music. That makes sense as a collaboration, and then you put that on the chain and you might make it the first time ever. And that is an incredible new thing that just happened, because there was this collaboratory mindset that I already knew from university that is going to be very, very beneficial, and that's how it should work. But I just don't like these automated sort of big ideas that we've inherited from these bloody massacre battles of ideology from the past century, but then we're not educated to unpack in order to resist and make up our own minds of what's actually valuable and what's not valuable about them. What should you throw away and what should you keep? And this is a part of the university responsibility of why I'm so pissed at my university. There's so many things that sort of are a bit of a letdown that you have to go through a very dark path in order to realize, in order to become yourself. And maybe that's something that is useful.
No, I think it is, and I think that the cheers. By the way, it's but no, I think that's really useful. I think that the sad thing is that we can't have multiple points of view. Like, it's only really one way of thinking that's kind of acceptable, especially in art, and art's supposed to challenge people. So we're doing a great disservice to not celebrate every form of expression. And also, in regards to the kind of crypto drama and art, I think that one of the problems is a lot of artists. You're an exception to the rule, and there are a lot of exceptions to the rule, but a lot of artists aren't clued up on the business side of things, and they tend to be a little bit on the, I guess, unstable side is the way to put it. And I think now that collectors can see...
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, I think now collectors can see those artists all the time. It creates quite a problem, because normally you'd have like an art show, and you'd have this kind of crazy, eccentric individual turn up, and he'd be a bit rude to all the collectors, but they'd be like, oh, it's fantastic. That's something that, he's an interesting person, he's an artist. But when that's in your face every single day, it becomes a little bit obnoxious. And obviously I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about the kind of crypto art space as a whole. I think that there's a big problem with some artists being too in collector's face all the time, whereas they started out with the collector thinking, oh, eccentric, interesting individual. Over 365 days of seeing that every day, they arrive at the conclusion that it's not eccentric and interesting, it's sociopathic, which maybe some artists are, but that's not what you would have thought in the past. You would have had the perception of this very interesting person coming to this show. And I think that, I think that people are doing themselves a disservice maybe by being too prevalent on social media.
Yeah, for sure, and not necessarily having the tools to unpack the trauma that made you an artist to begin with, because there's most of the, especially visual artists and those who work mostly by themselves. I mean, they became that way because they're not very good with people, and usually that you're not very good with people is because you're afraid of them. Yeah. And there usually is some sort of a cause of what some human beings cause in order for you to be that way, and that's why NLP was such a important part of my life, and psychedelics were an important part of my life. I sort of decided, because there was plenty of volatility and plenty of reasons for victimhood and all of these kinds of things that played a dark part of my coming of age in a certain kind of sense, and then I just decided that this won't be the defining stuff of my life. I will have balance. And it was a very decisive decision, and I worked very, very hard on that thing. So it's not like I don't have compassion for it, but I also know that compassion alone won't fix those problems, and it demands courage from someone to go and explore those dark things in their character or who they are. If you do an ayahuasca session in the Mexican jungle, that's not an easy thing to do. Or if you go on a course like the NLP courses that I went to, it's like there were
what's
2
NLP?
to 3 life.
I don't actually know. What's NLP?
It's called it's neuro-linguistic programming, and it was in part founded by this genius called Richard Bandler, who essentially just figured out how the mind and body system works, kind of like your human os X, if you will. And once you know how it works, you can start to tamper with it. Like, for example, if you let's say you were in a car accident or something like that, it's very likely that you have a 5-second clip in your head that you keep playing back to, and you have a strong emotion to that memory. But let's say you ask someone to go to the very beginning of that clip that they remember when the car flipped or something like that, or they saw someone, their family member upside down next to them after they flipped or whatever. And usually it's about 5 seconds. Then you ask them to play the clip and they feel awful. Then rewind the clip and then say, turn that clip now black and white in your mind and play the clip. And then they go, Okay. And you go back and then you say, well, now play circus music as you play the black and white clip. Like, da, 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 da. Now put a circus, now put a Christmas hat on your family member's head as you play the circus music black and white in that whole thing. And as soon as that person starts to laugh, as they say, that time heals wounds, but what actually happens is that you have a loosening experience to that memory that you might be a traumatizing thing that is keeping you in that traumatic loop. So that's just one of the thousands and thousands of examples of what you can do with some of the sort of memories that are holding you back, or ideas about the world, or belief systems altogether, like money is bad. Well, is it bad? Let's explore it, and then you you start to go through a variety of different processes of why you might have ended up believing that that's so, even though it's the blood vessels of the whole of the world. So it's like those kinds of things. So I found it endlessly beneficial and inspiring, and of course, when I figured out how that system works, I was able to start helping other people with their stuff. So it's a I see many artists in these destructive loops, like destructive spirals, because they don't have the tools of how to reverse the cycle of that spiral becoming a positive spiral. And this is with a lot of headache, blood, and sweat that I managed to do in my own life, and it's now a very grateful thing, and maybe I can guide other people to start their own path if they haven't arrived there yet.
Oh, that was some good stuff. Yeah, so that's really interesting. So I don't know if you mind getting into the subject, but the DMT thing. If we do you mind talking a little bit about it?
Sure, no, no,
No,
no,
okay,
not at
great.
all.
So I will be completely candid, and I found that an incredibly useful part of finding who I was and getting myself out of a destructive spiral. Now I didn't do any neuralistic programming, but um, what I did find is that was kind of a catalyst to pull myself out of and see myself from a third person perspective and kind of find a new way of seeing things. I mean, what was kind of your experience with that, and how did that play into kind of your self discovery?
DMT was such a beautiful thing. I was in Vienna, and it was after a long process. I made this first time in my life. I was on a big stage. We did a whole performance for an hour at the World Body Painting Festival, and it was a long haul to prepare to do that. And again, it was something that was very personal and so important, as it always is, and whatever. And at the end of it, I was at a friend's pad in Vienna, and he had some and said that this might be cool for you to do. And the scene and setting was right. And it was like arriving. There's this fractal ocean that took me over. I arrived to another dimension. That's the only way I can describe it. There were these angelic beings there that welcomed me. I felt unconditional love, like never before. And I was given a very simple bit of life advice that stays with me today, because it was just that, I was frustrated at a bunch of things not going my way, or going quickly enough. And basically, it was just this perspective that sometimes when I have the red light, that means that other people have the green light. And sometimes when I have the green light, other people have the red light. As in that you are part of a community, that you're part of a world that is interactive, and it's not all about you. and sometimes when you're in the trenches of your own stuff, those kinds of things can really hit home like a baseball bat. And it did. It was such a beautiful thing. And it lasted about 10 minutes, even though it probably felt like a lifetime. And then the next day, I was I was flying back to Helsinki, and there was a transparent sort of element in the airport, and I thought that nothing was, it was just 10 minutes and it's over, but apparently not, because I walked into that transparent sort of wall type thing at the airport, and was a little puzzled about how the world worked for a couple of months after that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I found that as well. But it's the same thing. I came back with a piece of advice. I came back with something that kind of changed my way of seeing the world, and I would say overwhelmingly got me out of a destructive spiral with other things, and was a positive experience. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating everyone needs to make their own decisions about what they do. We're just talking about personal experiences. But But I do think that I'm almost reluctant to call it the same thing as any other type of kind of substance, because it's not the same. It's not something that you would run off and do for fun, if that makes sense. It's kind of it's
Yeah,
not
no,
no
not at all.
no. There's not much that's fun about it. It's not something you could just do and do again. It's something that actually kind of actively discourages you from doing it again.
It's, I think the large picture with regards to crypto or many of these types of things is that I understand why many people would be discouraged of talking about DMT or ayahuasca or whatever it is, but it's one of those things. It's like I was deathly afraid of any psychedelics before I did them, because I thought, well, I'm already kind of crazy. What if the things about them are true and I become more crazy and I won't be able to come back from that and whatever? And then I discovered Terence McKenna and a bunch of other like institutions. What's it called? I always forget the.
Is it the one? I'm not quite sure if it's the one that's
4 letters. Jesus.
Oh, is it the one that Albert Hoffman ran? No, I'm not sure.
No, it's the MAPS.
Oh, MAPS. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so you get all the sort of actual scientific research and the credible scientists working in that field and whatever, and opening it up and being brave about their own thing.
Yeah.
I just listened to all of that stuff for about, I think, 30, 40 hours of different lectures and things like that.
Just to be clear, that isn't the same thing as the new MAPS, which is something completely different. But what does it stand for, the one that you're talking about? Because there's now another acronym for MAPS, which is about something.
Institute of Psychedelic Research, whatever it is. If someone Googles MAPS and psychedelics, that'll come up.
Okay.
But essentially, like Rick Doblin, is that the guy who? But never mind. The idea is that you might have a perception of something like that is being touted upon and said that this is absolutely how it is, with a certain kind of force that you're meant to believe this thing. Like you're meant to believe all drugs are bad. But then you discover that not only are they not the same, they're worlds to themselves in a certain kind of sense. And some of them are very helpful and some of them not so much. With regards to psychedelics, like for example, it's about middlemen in a certain kind of sense, much like it is in crypto, is that you have this whole central banking system or banking altogether, and people don't really understand how money works. And in a similar kind of sense, people don't really understand how health works, because it's beneficial. Let's say maybe some of the first churches or some of the first spiritual insights people ever got was on psychedelics, and psychedelics have been with us for thousands and thousands of years, and likely played a major part in of coming to consciousness in a certain kind of sense. And you have a direct experience with the immaterial, and then you don't need a priest. You don't need an institution. You don't need the Catholic Church in order to access this divine realm. Well, that's not necessarily a very good thing for the Catholic Church. And if they've had thousands of years to develop into the global force that they are, they might be disparaging for you to have this direct access because it's beneficial for them in order for them to be in between this whole thing. And I'm not only saying that that's how it is. There's obviously beneficial things that people are getting from the church and or organized religion and whatever. There's beautiful things about that too. But let's just call it that there's a massive incentive for the middle guys to get corrupted along the way in order for you to have the direct experience.
Yeah.
And whether that's the pharmaceutical companies, whatever, all those kinds of things, you need to have a lot of courage in order to resist and be explorative, let's say cautiously, and getting educated of what it is that works for you. And I find it that part of the reason why I feel very comfortable in the crypto world is that there's a lot of people like us here. They didn't just swallow everything that was forced upon their throats and said that this is how it sort of works, which feels like this might not be in my own benefit. And you go and explore, and it's the intent is not to break the law. The intent is not to be antisocial. The intent is not to just rebel for the sake of rebellion. It's more like this thing of, this is what my soul calls me to do, and this is the right thing to do, and I don't care who the fuck you are. you're in the way of it now, saying that I can't have this direct experience and this what feels to be the most important thing because of I don't know why.
Yeah.
But it's none of your business.
No, I
So,
agree. I think that.
and maybe this leads to
Oh, sorry.
actually another. No, sorry, I'm just getting on a roll here.
No, keep going. Keep going.
Because this is to do with the modern day politics as well, which was so difficult to understand. But once it locked, this is such a useful perspective for me, at least, because the whole left and right conversation is interestingly, if you look at the history of communism or socialism and all of these different institutions of what it is, that there are various forms, and fascism and whatever, there are various forms of collectivism. And then as an individual, and especially artists, I think, are very susceptible to collectivist ideas because they're very guilty of the fact that it's a very individualistic pursuit of being an artist. It's probably one of the most individualistic things you could ever do. In a certain sense, you could say a right-wing agenda.
Yeah.
Is that then you have Picasso who wants to become a communist in order to balance this type of thing out. But the danger of this whole thing is that if you only become, let's say the true left wing represents the collective, and it's really important that we have a representative element of the whole of the collective and the whole of the unity of the world and different kinds of things that are about community and all those kinds of things. But it's not very... Yeah, but then there's not really anything. If you think of the left and right conversation at the moment, it's like Nazis who are national socialists, and then you have communists who are just communists and socialists. So you're sort of a collectivist or a different type of collectivist, and if you're perceived as normal or balanced, you're in between these two forms of socialism. And then where are you as an individual exactly? You're not even on the map. Because it's just perceived that
everyone kind of demands that you fall into all of those categories. Like, I think the people who have taken to the more extreme left-wing view have decided that you're either with us or against us. So if you're not one of us and you don't believe in everything that you must be with the Nazis. And I'm not even sure that the Nazis believe what the left-wing people believe them to believe. I'm not even sure that they know what a Nazi is. I'm completely honestly.
Yeah. No, but that's the whole thing, is that I'm not with any of them.
No,
I'm not a collectivist.
I think most people aren't, and that's the crazy thing. We've got these very noisy people telling everyone, you fit into this group, you are this and you are that. And most people, before 2016, I didn't even know, most people didn't even conceptualize the idea of left and right wing. They were just living their lives. And then suddenly everything's become political, and everyone's had to even if you don't think you are, someone else will tell you fit in one of these boxes, and most people don't.
Yeah, and all of these things about group identity feel really, really scary to me. Whether and if you identify as a human being only with your group and your group first, I start to wonder, where are you as an individual? Are you a good or a bad person? Like, I couldn't care less what your color, gender, whatever. These are immutable characteristics. I think it's evil and retarded to be just judging people on by something that they have no control over.
Yes.
But I certainly look at people as individuals and what their incentives are, what they represent. Are they good people? Like, are they trying to be constructive? Are they tempered? Are they balanced? All of those kinds of things, I really do. And I think I pay a lot of attention to it because I respect myself as an individual and as a voice, but I also understand that I can't do things just because I want to do them, because if it does influence the bigger picture, the collective, in a very negative kind of sense, then you're just an asshole. And I don't want to be an asshole. So if a balanced human being, or I think the right and left conversation, if it's done correctly, it's more like me and what's in front of me. It's like the correct right is the individual, and then the left is the collective, and it's our interaction in between one another.
A balance between the two. Both of them are important. This demonization of everything right-wing without really understanding what the principles of right-wing politics are, and then from the right, the demonization of everything left-wing, everyone's lost kind of sight of what these two things actually represent. And as you said, one of them is collectivism, one of them is individualism, and you need both. You can't just be an arsehole and go all the way on one side, and you can't be completely collective, because it involves forcing other people to do stuff. And the other way of looking at it is equality and justice. And you need both of these things. That's why, Lady Liberty and all the kind of, on all of the courthouses has scales, because everything's about a balance.
For sure. And then one of the things that because I went on a bike ride just to clear my head before this chat, because it's always a good thing to do a bit of exercising before to get the mind straight. One of the things that I realized that no matter what the political spectrum or sort of idea coming at the individuals at the moment is that in one form it has a kind of formula that feels a little bit like someone says something like, you shouldn't drown kittens. And then anyone who's not a lunatic or a troll will agree. And the trolls are even probably don't believe that. They just want to jump on your cause and give you a hard time because you're weird saying that to begin with. But then the sort of with the don't drown kittens, then bow to my will.
Yeah.
And with it comes, whatever the Flat Earth Society is the one who is saying, don't drown kittens. And if you say, well, you don't want to drown kittens, do you? And then you're like, well, no. Well, then fund our Flat Earth Society. And I'm going,
yeah,
hold up a minute.
It's like if you're not for the flat Earth, you want to drown kittens. It's this unfair framing of things. It's like no one is against those things. It's just maybe your organization isn't the correct one that I want to be funding.
And whatever it is that you're putting in the drinking water with this incredibly bland statement that you just did, then allows you all of a sudden to do whatever it is that you want. And again, it's that whole thing. I look at the collective. If the collective movement doesn't feel like that's a very healthy thing for independent individuals who are not doing anything wrong in the world, then I'm probably not going to agree with it much. And this is equally true of the left and right and whatever movements that are about us. And it's sort of, it's very intimidating to see how unbalanced people are and whatever, because, you go into conversations about, I don't talk about Trump ever, because basically I've got so many people who I love dearly who are either super pro or anti. And I want to have my mind with me and say, well, this is probably a good thing that he did, and this is probably a bad thing that he did.
And also, I think people have suddenly, overnight, forgotten what everyone agreed before was, it doesn't really matter who's president, the same thing will happen no matter what. And then suddenly, now it's like, no, this is life or death, it's going to make a difference. It's like, honestly, it's probably not going to make that much difference to everyday people's lives. Who's the president of the United States is. It never did before. It probably never will again, and some people will say that's a reason to upend the system, and I don't actually disagree with the idea that maybe the system needs to change. I just think the direction of the people trying to change it is misguided. As you said, their solution is to give the government all the power to get rid of the power, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Foot and gas at the same time. I've got a bit of a bridge actually to talk a little bit about the latest piece that I'm working
with. Definitely. This is there a place that
Bitcoin
I can find
OG.
I can get it up on screen?
I don't want to show it yet because it's not ready. I'll just talk about a very specific small part of it, which is that there's a sort of western and eastern front of this map-like game-like structure that this art piece has, and on the other side there's Yuri Bezmenov, the KGB spy. And he's on a television screen, and how incredibly blood-chilling his lectures now 40 years after, how predictive they are of the situation where we're at the same time. But also on the other side of this island, there's inspired by our talks when we first met about these rocks being put on pedals in art galleries, and everyone meant to be pretending like this is great art. And there's that part of the CIA history where they became a part of the modern art movement, and Jackson Pollock and those kinds of things, and held them on a long loose type of rope and monitored it because they wanted to. You had, on the one hand, you had the sort of KGB propaganda coming into the West, so the West to combat these sort of idealistic sort of working class ideas started pumping their own form of abstract art that had everything to do with liberalism and those kinds of things, and all of a sudden you could do absolutely anything that you wanted in art, and it was funded no matter what it is that you did. And I think we're suffering the consequences in art and its reputation and this sort of shock therapy art that is now nothing but marketing in a certain kind of sense, like with these bananas and whatever bullshit. It's if you don't know the history of how that went, and these sort of under the surface hidden forces and big ideological battles that have been going on, a lot of this doesn't really make sense. But it's such a it's such a shame, because both of those movements, no matter whether they came from the West or the East, in that sense, they're to the detriment of art, to the origin of what I perceive to be the reverence of art, these transcendent experiences and awe and the Sistine Chapel and those kinds of things, where right now the majority of the art world feels like an inner circle jerk, where you do the cool footnote of the footnote to your fellow artist, who then thinks you're cool because you also get the footnote, and anyone not part of that circle jerk just goes like, well, this is fucking stupid, and I guess art is rubbish then. Because again, in a similar kind of sense, it's about the inner circle talking to one another and then fighting amongst each other, as opposed to trying to do the function of art that is helping humanity. And and again, it's just that's the kind of thing that I'm wanting to do, and have the reverence, be reverent of the thousands of years of tradition that it has, and utilize all the technology, all the amazing things of whatever we now have, and make it cutting edge. But I'm not here to make art for my friends. Like, I'm really happy if my cool friends make cool art, and I'm happy to be associated with them, but this is not who it's for. Like, our beer evenings are for us, and we can talk whatever it is that we want. But if we're here to perform a certain kind of function that has any meaning whatsoever, stop being a circle jerkist.
Yeah.
That would be that would be my sort of hint towards other artists.
No, it's true. But I think that is the problem, is we're finding it very hard to onboard traditional art collectors to this space, and that's not made easier by the fact that it is a lot of the sales happening in crypto are artists buying each other's work at a lower level, and there's nothing really wrong with that, but it does create this atmosphere, as you said, of kind of the circle jerk, and a lot of people have, when a whale comes in, I hate the term whale, but we have two classes. We've got collectors and we have whales. And the collectors who are in the space are great, and they're genuinely just buying because they like the work and they think the space is going to be worth stuff. And on the other end, we've got the whales, who I guess are kind of like art dealers. And it's funny in crypto art that some artists really don't like them, because it's mirroring the art world. Everything mirrors the art world almost exactly. Everyone hates the dealers because they bought my artwork at £30 and then they sold it for 300,000, and therefore they're evil. And it's like, well, they also increased your price. Like, people have got to look at all of these aspects. I think it's just the problem is that we're all in each other's face too much, like, in this space.
Yeah, and again, you didn't have the foresight to understand.
Yeah. Sorry.
For sure, and you sold it for $30 because you don't have any self-worth, and you didn't get a financial education. You didn't learn it, even though it's on YouTube right now. You have zero excuses. All of these different things that would cause you to hold on to things or make better deals, or so that if the price 300% went up with the person who resold your work, then maybe it's a little bit more tolerable. If it's like, it's understandable if you had such low self-esteem that you sold a piece for $30 and then someone made 30 grand, you're going to be pissed, but it's still your own fault.
Yeah.
And in the process, if you have a little bit of patience and understand that entrepreneurs do a lot of stuff for a long time for free in order to get to where they are, then it's not a good thing. Because if you get to say that your piece got resold for 30 grand, I mean, the likelihood of you being able to sell it for the next piece for a lot more is great. So thank them.
Yeah. And artists can, they have the ability to produce new work. That's the other thing that people seem to be forgetting. Like, a lot of people are getting hung up on one artist stealing another's work. And it's like, well, you can just make another one and your work's still worth more just because that person used it in, say, like a collage or something. Doesn't diminish the value of your artwork. I think people worry too much about things that are kind of inconsequential in the long run.
So what about you? What's your sort of biggest pet peeve, let's say, about artists in the emerging space?
My in the image, actually, I like it. I think that we're at risk of cannibalizing ourselves in the crypto art space. I think that we've got this, and it's not. It really is the artists who spend too much time on social media, and I was kind of guilty of it myself because for the longest time the BAEs only really had. We're launching our 2.0 soon, so it's going to be a lot more chill. But our main way of exposing ourselves was Twitter, and I never used social media before, so I'm pretty guilty of this too. I got sucked into it, and I've taken a step back, and I've realised that the community is kind of isolating itself, and it's very hard. People used to say to me whenever we spoke in person and talked, whenever I walk into the crypto art community on Twitter, I feel like I've walked in the middle of an argument, and that was kind of a private thing that people said, but now people are just saying it outright on Twitter. Things like, as I skim on a daily basis, I see one or two tweets a day that are artists being like, I was going to get into crypto art, but I've seen all this drama and I'm not really interested anymore. So I think that the best thing that people could do, and most people aren't going to do this, but stop tweeting out opinions, and I'm guilty of that too. I'm stopping. Twitter is very addictive, but and just start shilling your art. Just make this, it's as bad as it sounds, just make this entire space a shill fest, because that's what the really successful art communities, if you look at concept artists, and I think one who I constantly bring up is Zarlin, because if you look at her Twitter feed, there is no opinion on there. Occasionally she'll comment on stuff, but it is just shill my art, here's my art. And she's very successful on the platform, and and she sells concept art as well, and commissions. And I think maybe if we look to the community of concept artists, some of which who have hundreds of thousands of followers, they do it in a way where they don't let their opinion get involved. And I think that might be the way that we expand this, is if people just come into this community and see artwork. They don't see the artist's opinions, they see the bio, and maybe it's fine to have a smidge of it here and there, but I think that if we just turned it into a shill fest, we'd all be better off for it.
Well, that's actually, and this is funny because he'll get this, because Zuby is the notable exception,
Yeah.
because he even made his Twitter the notable exception according to the Biden speech about how black people are apparently like all think alike and whatever, with notable exceptions. Which
Oh, that was awful. I saw that. It was like, you can't say that. It's
but that's he might be the someone who actually, with his art, even though his music's great, his personality he's obviously a strong individual and all that kind of stuff, but he notified a niche in terms of opinions, as in like there's not many black conservatives.
Yeah.
So, and that's what he authentically is, so he started talking about that, and I think his
Oh no,
Twitter
I agree with
in the
that.
span of a couple of years grew from like I think 10 grand to now it's like 300,000 or something like that, and it's because of his opinions. I don't think because of the music tracks that he did.
But I do think, though, that's very true, and I do think that the BAE as a whole has had some success being the platform of not any particular ideology, just the ideology that you're free to express yourself no matter what. From people like Mr. Yuck to a Tom to whatever, anyone is allowed to, if the collector wanted to buy it, that's up to them. It's not up to us to tell an artist what is and isn't art. Excuse me. What isn't and isn't a suitable form of expression. But what I mean is the space is quite small right now, and people talking too much about, the people who want to buy the artwork that we're selling, the crypto artwork. Let's be completely honest, under no illusions. Most, not all, there are a few people from the traditional art world, and they're the collectors. They're people like Lev, they're people like Wang Zhang, people like that. They're genuine, or Zabaduk, they're genuine collectors who understand artists. But then the people who are buying at high levels, I feel like come from the more left-wing persuasion. And I feel like they're more into that sort of side of things. And I could be completely wrong, but I do think that some of them just care about making money, but I do think we need to be careful while we're a small space, because the other thing, and I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but the other thing that people don't realise, I think, is when they go around labeling people these you know, whatever. Let's just say labeling people alt-right and all of this bollocks, which is just not true. No one in the space, no one in the crypto art space, hands down, is alt-right. It's just nonsense. They're all gone from Twitter. They're all those people are kind of a figment of people who like to accuse people's imagination at this point on social media. They obviously they exist in real life, but they've all been kicked off. So, but when they go around labeling people like that, we're such a small community and we're such a small industry that we run the risk of having a article run which groups all of the platforms into one barrel, groups all of the artists into one barrel, and says something stupid like, you know, Vice headline, crypto art is the new alt-right, and no one clipped this, crypto art is the new alt-right bastion, because some idiot is going around calling all of us that in the community. A journalist picks up on that and they're like, this is it, this is going to make a great story. And then suddenly every platform, every artist, whether they like it or not, is grouped into that. And I think that we need to be quite careful as a community not to fall into something that's not true because of people wanting to feel superior by labeling other people. And I'm sure that the people I'm talking about aren't even watching right now. But I do think that's a danger, is if we all turn on each other and start labeling crazy labels, the main media might decide that crypto art is the next target for their woke outrage.
Sure, but at the same time, I mean, I've got a 20-year history of doing a bunch of different things in order to, like, at least counter for those who care
Yeah.
what it is that I've represented my whole life, and those kind of, I'm not in it because whether it comes to, like, let's say the real political conversation that we're having at the moment, that most people aren't aware of, is the central banking system versus communism. That might be the actual left and right, so to speak, which is just not hitting anywhere close to what's actually going on. So, but even courage again is the really important thing. And I think of someone like Picasso. I mean, he didn't like when fascism arrived to Paris, and what he didn't kowtow to the Nazis. What he did is that they came to his gallery. I mean, the whole of Paris was in chaos, and he said, "Listen, this is not how it's going to work, and I'm not going to." Like when he made Guernica, that wasn't when the thing was over. Like he resisted and was who he was and was brave about it. And I think altogether, what it is, most individuals, because it's the same always, no matter where someone comes at you with. You need to be able to stand your ground. You need to be able to be brave, and you need to be able to be strong, and be who you are. And then it's like the basic bully thing that you'll get in school. If you cower and go under the table, and whatever someone throws at you, you immediately bow to them. You're gonna be screwed for
Oh, no,
forever.
definitely. I don't think we should. What I was kind of saying is, I think that, and I don't think these people would take the advice, but I just think that it's dangerous when we're this small of a community to be, I guess, stirring up this much drama. It doesn't seem productive as a whole, and I think that's why maybe you're taking a step back from the whole crypto art kind of Twitter community is because there are some people coming in now who seem to not have the intentions of just selling art and making a living. They're trying to make it about something it's not.
Yeah, but I think altogether that just happens when there's money and livelihoods and people's, and it's not all about money. I mean, ideology plays a huge part in people's lives and what it is that they believe. And then if they can make money about their ideology, and then, you know, it's a whole mess of things, I suppose, altogether with whatever people's incentives are. And the more the space grows, I mean, I'm thinking next it's the Pixar render farms of NFTs or whatever massive company is coming in, and they're start to like, because the shock art at some point, I remember those things in the early 2000s. I mean, there was the Helsinki Museum of Modern Art. There were these blenders full of piss and excrement and whatever that just were whirring, and of course everyone was outraged because, you know, how can this be art that excrement is being
Piss
blended?
Jesus, right? That was one of the ones that.
Like all of that kind of stuff. And it's not now people getting into like, because it's such a lame version of it. Like, for example, the Miami thing, the tape banana, because like to anyone with a half a sense, they'll realize that of course these people knew what they were doing. The gallery probably gave someone the 120 grand or 300 grand for the two bananas and said, come and buy these banana off our wall. And of course everyone's going to lose their minds. And even if to begin with, let's say you had excrement and blood in a blender, maybe that was some vague notion against anti-consumerism or things like that, and you were not meant to be a commercial like something. Now this shock art for the most part is the worst version of just pure marketing that the original shock art was meant to be against for. So in some sense you could say that capitalism swallowed that as a thing altogether, and these people doing these things, they don't know how incredibly lame they come across to anyone who's been around the block a couple of times, you know. So I think the whole thing about art right now is that if you, like, again with the big movements and let's say someone like Jordan Peterson and what he said about post-constructivism or postmodernism and the ashes of it and loss of meaning and all those kinds of things, is if you truly want to be on the cutting edge of art right now, is that you're coming like a phoenix from the ashes of these centuries, if not thousands of years old traditions and institutions that have been pulverized to the ground, where everyone's lost their direction and hope. And it's no longer, the game for a while has been about being a rebel. Now the real rebel game has been a constructivist. What can you feasibly construct out of the ashes of postmodernism that is useful for people so that we can have fruitful, great lives? Because you can't only criticize and pulverize something and then not offer anything in return. And we're at that point where we have nothing left. We don't have religion. We don't even have science anymore with these things. None of these big things mean anything to anyone anymore, and we're confused about our media. We don't know where to go and what the fuck's going to happen with the economy. All of these things. So it's now, I feel, the responsibility of the artists to make visions of where to go. And that's incredibly hard. You're going to have to study. You're going to have to really know what it is that you're doing. So in one sense, maybe you have someone like Lucio Poletti's propaganda Bitcoin art. It's already 1,000 times more helpful than any of the majority of the stuff that the contemporary galleries are pushing as still the ashes of postmodernism. Even if it's propaganda, and I'm not a big fan of propaganda art to begin with, but I have a lot of respect for Lucio's doing, because his stuff truly is constructing something and a way for people to get into a positive cycle of things. So depending on how big of a holistic picture you want to paint of how much of a fresco or what to follow into a vortex you can have the ability to make people to see what their future could be like, or what the vision for society could be, that's the game.
No, I think that's solid. So you think that artists are now kind of responsible for putting the meaning back into society?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up idolizing all the Bill Hickses and George Carlins and the rebels and the misfits and the poets and the that whole thing. I grew up idolizing them, but I realized some time ago that that's not who we can be anymore.
Yeah.
We need to be the opposite of them now. Well, not opposite, but we need to be a new thing, and being a new thing is hard.
Yeah. It's okay. So we're doing pretty well. Does anyone who's watching? We've had 5 people watching the whole time. So thank you so much, guys. Does anyone have any questions for VESA? And do you want to do the Vina thing? Do you want to talk about that for a little bit, or do you want to kind of?
We can. Yeah, for sure. I mean,
I'm not gonna lie. I really need the toilet, so I'm gonna put the video on, which should be here, and then I'm gonna pop to the toilet for I'm gonna be 1 minute. I promise.
No, I'll do the same.
So this is a clip. You'll hear it playing in the background. I'm just gonna play this for a minute or so, and I'm hoping that the sound will come through.
आप पर इल्ज़ाम है पाकिस्तान की आवाम की एक सेगमेंट जो है वो समझती है कि आपने हिंदुस्तान जाकर पाकिस्तान के कल्चर की धज्जियां बखेर दी, जो ड्रेसेस आपने पहने, जो एक्शंस आपने किए, जो आपकी जिस तरह की इंटरेक्शन थी वहाँ पे वहाँ के लोगों के साथ, वो पाकिस्तान की नज़रियाती असास, यहाँ के कल्चर, यहाँ के लोगों की तर्जमानी नहीं करती। पाकिस्तान के सफ़ीर के तौर पे अगर ये इल्ज़ामात सही हैं, आपको शर्मिंदगी है या आप समझती हैं इल्ज़ामात ही गलत है?
देखिए, इन इल्ज़ामात की कोई बेस ही नहीं है, क्योंकि बिग बॉस जो शो है उसका फॉर्मेट इस तरह का है कि पूरी दुनिया से, सिर्फ पाकिस्तान से नहीं, हॉलीवुड से सेलिब्रिटीज़ भी उस शो में गई थी। उस शो का फॉर्मेट ही ऐसा है कि ना ही वो कोई कल्चरल वैरायटी शो है जहाँ पे किसी के कल्चर को प्रमोट किया जाता है, और ना ही वो कोई मजहबी शो है जहाँ पे किसी को अपने मजहब को प्रमोट करने की इजाज़त दी जाती है, क्योंकि जितनी भी आप मजहबी किताबें साथ लेकर जाते हैं आपको इजाज़त नहीं होती कि आप अंदर लेकर के जाएँ।
फिर मेरा बुनियादी सवाल आपसे यही है कि क्या आपको लगता है बीइंग अ पाकिस्तानी के वीना मलिक साहिबा ने अपनी हरकत से वहां पर जाके पाकिस्तान की तजलील की?
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। सबसे पहले तो मैं अपनी बहन को पाकिस्तान आमद पर खुश आमदेद कहता हूँ, और यकीनन जो उन्होंने बातें की हैं उससे मेरा दिल भी दुखा है और उन तमाम पाकिस्तानियों का दिल दुखा है जो ये समझते हैं कि वीना मलिक साहिबा जो हैं वो पाकिस्तान के उन लोगों में है जिनकी शोहरत पाकिस्तान की वजह से है। मैं ये समझता हूँ कि वो एक तरफ तो दो कौमी नजरिए की नफी कर रही थी और दूसरा उन मसमूम नजरियात को फरोग दे रही थी जो इस जैसे मारूफ।
So, I'm back. So we just played the first kind of minute of the Vina video, and that's just the introduction, kind of her being told off by this cleric. So talk to me a little bit about the Vina artwork you created and what the story behind that is.
Sure. She's a Bollywood star, big star at that moment in 2012, and I saw that whole clip, and it really escalates from there, and it's quite the story, because once they really start hammering it in that she's a bad woman because she kissed a guy in the like I think it was the India's Big Brother show, they try to shame her as a really horrible woman or something like that, and she turns it around and exposes the sort of double standards of what was going on there. And because of that, a couple of oil trucks came out on a highway out of nowhere and tried to crash her car and tried to kill her, and she had to escape from her country the next day. And I believe at that point she was in between somewhere in India and Dubai and whatever. And I thought that was an incredibly inspiring interview, and I shot her an email of what if I body painted you and we made these art pieces that was trying to heal some of these rifts that was going on in between Pakistan and India, of course, but the bigger picture of East and West and religions, because I was very interested in world religions at that point, and traveled to Egypt and all the way exploring these big ideas. And she said, yeah, let's meet in London. And I just came out of a hospital. I had really bad lung infection and nearly died, and a back surgery type of deal. So I was a complete mess, and she was a mess because she had been exiled out of her country. And we met in London and decided that we're going to do this thing, that it's controversial, obviously, but if we're approaching it in a way that we try and make something beautiful and constructive to the world, maybe it's a worthwhile cause. And it took 2 years altogether, the process from start to finish, and then we launched this project in London. And of course the media came in looking for a train wreck. They were trying to see if this Pakistani Muslim lady being body painted and some things about big ideas is something that is going to be very bad. But having preempted this, and our intention being the opposite of putting petrol on a fire, even in Pakistan, they realized that these were beautiful works, and we were trying to find the common things in between Finland and Pakistan and these big religions and what they... I mean, you obviously have big differences in between them, but you also have a lot of similarities. And what we were trying to explore is the similarities in between them. And to make this kind of a thing that is the opposite in a certain kind of sense of at least not exploiting the controversy, the origin thought of controversy of what it might have to begin with. And then because of this thing, we reached about 300 million people to begin with. I mean, it's impossible to say what it was, but it was the BBC World, the Independent, and Vice, and all of these massive news people who were with. But I don't think till today has a single media outlet told what it is that we actually did and represented. Because it was much more about seeing if it was a train wreck, and when it wasn't, then it took. But there was a certain element of danger there. Of course, I probably emailed about 2,500 museums all over the world, and everyone was afraid of the project, despite of the intent and the output of what we came out there with. So it's a very important project for me. This is the piece behind me is one of them.
Yeah.
And it's, for example, that piece is called Mohenjo-Daro, which is a holy site in Pakistan. And out of Pakistan, they found this 15-year-old girl bronze statue who is very confident and in herself and dancing. I think it's called the Dancing Girl. And I asked her to model in her life, because she was a little bit that person, that very confident, outgoing person, a big star, and had a big sex appeal, I suppose, and she played into that a lot. And I tried my very best the whole time as we did this process to keep that part away from this whole thing and explore what it is that she felt like, having been exiled out of her country, and the real beauty that she had as a human being with a big heart, and how those mirrored these very, very big ideas of how big continents and this whole 26,000-year cycle that Plato called the Great Year, all of us have in common from our history. And it's still one of the most beautiful things that I've ever done, and I'm very, very proud of that whole project. But it's most things today that don't really, I suppose, get a fair rap in a certain kind of sense. But it is what it is. I'm still grateful that it happened. And
I think it's fantastic. And anyone, we lost a few people there because they're back. But anyone who wants to watch that full clip of her, I've put it in the chat. I actually think it's it's worth watching. Maybe it didn't come across quite right here, but to get the context. And I've also put a link to where you can find VESA's work, because this is something that's really interesting, and I think deserves. I always make you talk about it because I think it deserves a lot of attention. And I think it's a really interesting facet of work, which not many people would be brave enough to explore. But getting the conversation back to kind of crypto, is there any kind of we've covered quite a lot of bases. I mean, is there anything else that you want to add?
Well, maybe it's about the. I released a video just a while ago called the Sugar High NFT collecting, and it's again about a mixed bag that I think is really, really important, because it's not only about shitting on the Moon Boys and the 100Xers, because I think it's really important that you have a whole scene where this thing happens, that something was bought for $30 and then sold for 30 grand and whatever, and that keeps the whole motion forward, and that hype cycle and people making money is important. But at the same time, because in one way, saying that from the legacy art world, we would really need a bunch of adults coming into the art world right now and telling about the secondary market, like you often talk about, what makes art valuable, and exploring big ideas. And a lot of it now is how you make something that it's in motion and it's shiny and it's maybe looks like computer renderings from whatever. And those are very popular, and there's not much. Let's say sophistication of the past 1,000 years of art coming into today. It's almost like reinventing the wheel, and we need the adults to kind of temper things when it comes to money in terms of investment of the art a little bit. Not to say that it's only about gatekeeping, because that hasn't fared well in the legacy art world either, but the majority of those let's call it maybe there are gatekeepers to a certain degree. They haven't done a very good job at the legacy world, so there aren't really adults in the legacy world to be coming into the crypto art world. So I'm wondering how the whole thing is gonna so I tend to just somehow think, because expression wise, it's such a beautiful thing. Anyone can express, do their own thing, whether it's design, 3D, illustration, what it is, and mint them and sell them, whatever. It's a liberation of a whole creative class of people as a whole motion and a movement, and it couldn't be more beautiful. But then there's also these sort of sugar high ways of, now there's an announcement of a drop that is going to happen and the whatever, and then there's a huge sort of energy surge and everyone buys a bunch of sugar, and then they crash and they might not be able to sell it, and there's a whole bunch of different tactics that are being deployed that again have nothing to do with art. And there needs to be some temperance in between when serious people with serious money start to put it in, which is required for them to have some parties that they truly trust that this is going to be not only for the benefit of the platform and the artist, but also theirs. Someone needs to hold the side of the collectors as well to a certain degree. And I don't think
I was doing drops
that is...
Oh, sorry. I was doing drops for a little while, and unfortunately they do work, but it felt a little wrong. Like, I mean, we were doing it at a much lower level, but I think it does feel a little wrong to FOMO people on art, because art should be a slow process. It should be something that people think about. It should be something that, you know, you really consider adding this piece to your collection. And yeah, we've kind of stopped doing drops now, because I felt, as much as it definitely worked, I didn't feel like it was the right way of going about things.
That's very respectable, because but yeah, you're the same. You're in it for the long haul, and you're really here. The whole time that I've known you, I've never not felt like you're here for the love of art, and you really do want to keep the side of that. And you've always been in my corner as defending as an artist, and those things are really, they're massively valuable, because you have that perspective, because the collaborations with the variety of different platforms and conferences and everyone, it's valuable, but it's also it's super difficult. I really do say that with reverence. The whole thing is that people go and talk to one another and whatever, but it truly is difficult, because a lot of people in crypto have no idea where you're coming from. So you need to be fairly clear on and you can easily get exploited. And it's not even that those people are malicious who will do the exploiting. It's just that they don't understand at all where you're coming from. So it's to a certain degree, to have people who are in between and work towards the whole benefit of the whole space is really important. So my kudos for you for that.
I find it's the trading tactics. I find them a little, I don't know what the word is. It's I guess it works, and people are selling stuff, and it definitely works. You know, like, there's this whole problem with wash trading at the moment, and I had this whole report collated about all the other platforms, and I was kind of like, you know what? It's not really worth launching. Everyone knows that they wash trade. It's, you know, if you've got charts, and full disclosure, BAE 2.0 will have charts, but the WordPress will continue as it is, because it doesn't, if you can't beat them, join them. But the charts definitely make wash trading a thing, and there's never going to be a platform that has charts that won't have wash trading. It's, you know, people may say that Rari and the Rari token incentivizes wash trading more, and it might well do, but literally all you have to do, you know, here's a guide to wash trading on OpenSea. If you make your item a private item and then sell it between yourself, there's zero commission, but for some reason OpenSea still puts the price on the scoreboard. So you could wash trade on OpenSea all the way to the top with incredible ease. It's, if you have a chart on a platform, you will have wash trading. And maybe that's just part of how this works, because, you know, it's plain to see that certain platforms are doing disproportionately better than other platforms, and I don't think that there's a realistic distance between the two. No, I think I genuinely think there's a couple of platforms that don't do any of this, and I'll fully say I don't think Makers Places sales are fake at all. I don't think that they have any incentive to fake them, which is hopeful, but I do think that there are platforms that, when you look at the disproportionate between those two, it just doesn't make sense.
I actually don't know that side of things very well. I can't much
comment,
sorry,
but, I went off on a bit of a tangent.
What I can say is that one of the first things that I realized when I went to Miami is that art is absolutely everywhere. but also bizarrely, it's not necessarily a town that you would associate with great taste, in a certain kind of
have
sense.
you seen
And
the
then
people walking around?
no, but it's like the thing that really hit home very. Yeah, I mean, you've seen all the documentaries, probably the same ones, of cocaine cowboys and all that kind of stuff. And then I put one and one together. Is that one of the best ways to wash a bunch of money clean is buy paintings. No one can tell how much they're worth or whatever. And that's probably one of the reasons why there's a lot of art in Miami is cocaine. So that's what. I think altogether, when it comes to high abstraction, and I could take this to religion, I could take this to the economy, art, whatever it is that requires a lot of intelligence, and sometimes people they lose their footing of being on planet Earth anymore, in a certain kind of sense, and you can be endlessly curious about, let's say, a religion, and it can be very beneficial, and it can be some of the most beautiful substance in the world, but it's also because of that potential and that high abstraction, it's one of the places where a lot of, let's call it, fuckery happens. So you can't, whenever there's abstraction, intelligence, and incentive motives and a bunch of money, I don't think you can avoid that there are dark elements about that industry or sector. That's just inevitable, but that doesn't mean that it's all bad or it should be shut down or it shouldn't have a chance. Yeah. So I approach crypto in a similar kind of spirit, that there's truly beautiful things about it, but do your own research and don't be naive. It's like I've certainly had a bunch of my own naivety being shaken out of me. Like I said, the first time I went to Miami, that was $1 million thing that just melted off of my hands like quicksand in a certain kind of sense, but the money was actually never there. So it's a thing. But
I mean, I actually think you should definitely, for anyone watching, when this awful virus ends, but Miami was one of the best experiences when it comes to art. The entire city during December becomes basically an art fair. There's about 8 or 9 of them all at the same time in different locations, and there's so much to see. I would highly advise, if it happens this year, going there, because also the cool thing about, I think, American culture in general is they really understand the concept of networking, and Miami Art Basel isn't like Frieze London, where Frieze London's very kind of, I hate to say it like this, but it is focused on the art purely, whereas Miami seem to understand that the benefit of networking is there. And there's a lot more conversations, there's a lot more parties going on, and the parties are a big part of meeting people and selling yourself as an artist. If I could pick one week of art to go to a year, it would be the Miami Art Basel week.
Right. Well, I just haven't met, I mean, I had a gallery who was presenting me or representing me there for a while, but they didn't get a whole lot done. I actually just realized that I do a better job at selling my stuff and being and representing the galleries that I was associated with before. And that's not to say maybe there's even a couple of platforms or other galleries who are now a little bit afraid of me because I've said things like, well, I fired my galleries, but I didn't do it out of wanting to look good or say controversial things or whatever it is. I'm more than willing to work with people who are competent, who know what they're doing. It's just that I haven't met them yet. But I'd be very happy to focus much more on my creativity and the visions that I want to bring into life rather than the commercial side of it. But I suppose altogether this whole crypto journey has become in part an important education because of that, is that I've become fiscally responsible. And many people who get in touch with me, let's say they're a platform or something like that, they might be thinking that, okay, so here's an ideological artist, let's approach them and say something like it's all for the love and da-da-da-da-da, but they're surprised to get a response back from me saying that, oh, that sounds very idealistic and I don't think your platform is going to be a success if you don't think that the artists are coming there because they want to make a living in an incredibly difficult field, and I've invested 20 years into making this a viable business. So if this is not a business proposal, thank you very much and I wish you luck. Yeah. It's I wear my marketing hat and in other things, and then I wear my artist hat when I'm creating things, and I suppose those things can be very much taboo. I mean, making art about a monetary movement, this is a beautiful thing altogether, because you don't have any pro Wall Street artists. And then all of a sudden you have this whole motion of artists being behind a crypto art movement. And this is also why it's so beautiful that these it's counterintuitive to a lot of these people in crypto, that all of a sudden artists are viable vehicles for you to do high level PR for the whole of the space, who you should be supporting because they're supporting you, because your perception might be that artists are only some people who are in throwing sort of wrenches into the wheels of commerce. And that is the old world, yeah, for a large degree of it. But this is a new, different thing. But again, it's about changing that perception. And I think you're 100% right that this whole bullshit drama and this artists, because, and I'll say it again, cowardice of just focusing into other artists as opposed to into the expansion and doing the hard thing of actually expanding into new territory. You know, that needs to happen much more, because you know there are very, very serious platforms who are now looking into NFT collectibles, and serious people with serious connections who are looking into that stuff. But they see, oh, art is very, very interesting, oh, but these people are like infantile, so it'll just pass away if people don't mature.
Yeah.
So that's how it's going to go.
No, I know it's so difficult. It's really difficult to find what it is that we need to kind of do as a space. But so I guess we should kind of wrap it up. Does anyone have any questions for VESA who's been watching? Just put them in. Don't be shy. And in the meantime, is there kind of any last bits that you want to add? Plug your channels as well. Plug over YouTube and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, very cool. I mean, I'm probably most active on Twitter, even though
We've just spent the
it's a
last hour
difficult
and a half.
it's a difficult thing. So it's at Art by VESA. So VESA is my name, and you'll find it like that. And then the majority of my creativity is represented on artforcrypto.com, and that'll have links also to all the body painting stuff, because I've got two platforms and websites where the works are being sold. And Artevo, artevo.org is the other one with the body painting and abstract stuff. So that's it. And if you guys do have any questions, I'd love to.
Yeah, no, sentiment. I mean, we've had 5 very impressed 5 consecutive viewers who I think have pretty much watched the whole thing. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And yeah, I guess that's us done. Thank you so much. We'll see you
nice
next
one.
time. All right.
Yeah, fun, Sasha.
No, it was really fun. Hold on. Oh, hold on. We'll go back in. We had a question. Uranus likes to ask, the platform that you're talking about, the people seriously looking at, are the current platforms or platforms that have yet to come into existence? Platforms that you're talking about that are serious people. I see. Okay. So Uranus likes to asks, the platforms that you were kind of looking at, that we've been speaking about, that are kind of serious people are looking at, so like the more of the art collecting scene, I guess. Are they the current platforms, or are they platforms that you don't think exists yet?
I don't know all of them well enough in order to comment, but I think in that way, Robness, for example, is correct. Is that I mean, there's some sums that have been thrown around, like Whale Shark was saying that he's used a couple of $100,000 on super rare. So I can say that because it's public information or whatever. But Robness just sort of commented that that's really chump change in terms of the real art world of what's going on. And it does feel like a lot of money, but in terms of what's really going on, that's just the average painting being sold somewhere. And money...
I don't want this to come across wrong, but before working in crypto art, I used to source artworks for high net worth individuals, and I've sold in 4 or 5 artworks. Obviously, I didn't get a lot of this money, but some of this money went towards the BAE. I sold over €1 million worth of art in 4 artworks. So that's more than the entire value of the crypto art space right now. And those sort of people are always going to be interested in the legacy sort of work. So I think that it's quite hard to get people. It's hard to get people's head around the idea of the crypto art space.
Yeah, it'll grow. It'll get there, and my prediction is that there will be a flippening. That there is going to be a digital art piece that is going to be sold for more than any other physical art piece. I don't know how long we are from that, because it's crypto. It might be quicker than anyone anticipated after the next bull run, even. But and someone's marketing. Who knows? But that's the whole thing. It's like. If you have Sotheby's and Christie's, and they have incredible problems with authenticating high-level works, and they have the biggest guns to do so, it's only a matter of time before a living artist that is verifiably putting it on a platform and vouched in, and that can be put on the blockchain, that there's so many arguments of why that art piece can become the most biggest sale ever made. That it's only a matter of time, but I would be quite conservative of when that happens, but it will happen.
And to give an example of artists in the digital space, they sell usually with their own custom hardware, but Bill Viola, I believe his resale price is $500,000 or something close to that, and that's a purely digital work. So those sort of prices are not unheard of in the digital space. I think that what I really think is the problem with crypto art, and I think that this is going to persist, is the question that every single big art collector has is, how do I display it? And I'm not sure that our solution of saying, well, it's more about the collectorship, is really a solution. I think that we need to bridge it into the physical in a way that makes sense. You know, you don't have to code.
I don't think, respectfully, I disagree.
Yeah. Okay.
The disagreement would be that before I entered crypto voxels, I would have agreed with that, but because of the social aspect of crypto voxels, now what's going on with Corona, and what I tried to do with Ogar, with the digital pyramid, which I haven't done very successfully yet because I haven't had much time to focus on it. But the intent is that there's a digital live gallery that keeps changing in expression as a meetup space, an auction space, and like a treasure hunt, and an educational space, and all of these kinds of things that are incredibly hard to do in a physical kind of gallery space. Now that everyone is going more and more online and scenes are being created, then you can just let's say you have your own digital space, you have your own digital collection, you have some sort of an event, maybe a partnership, maybe a new thing that you've collected, and you have a community that follows you up until to the point of where you now have Travis, what's his name, who held that the rapper who held that 15 million concert
in crypto voxels.
No. The musician, the mainstream musician, rapper guy who I think it was Fortnite, where he held a concert for 15 million people.
Yeah.
So I think the thing will be associated with something like that. That there's going to be an artist who creates a whole space. I mean, the whole thing can be the art thing that is sold for whatever, and then that's where 50 million people flocked into, and those are made with a big platform and association and whatever, those kinds of things. And the social aspect of you showcasing your art, not to just a few people, but maybe millions of people at a time, is going to be the incentive that is going to drive the people putting that money into an art piece rather than a yacht.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, I don't disagree. Do you think then it's just a matter of time before people come around to the idea of buying this digital stuff? And because, you know, I think we had that guy recently saying, you know, why would I? And again, it almost feels, I hate to use the word, but it almost feels like a noob sort of thing to say, is you know, why can't I just go and download the image online? When do you think people will get it? Or do you think that it's our fault, as the kind of way that we're presenting it, that people don't get the value in this blockchain certification of a digital image?
Well, having seen how much the crypto space altogether, let's say 3 years ago when I came in, a little over 3 years ago, into Bitcoin, you know, all of those arguments were being said about Bitcoin, but hardly anyone ever says the same argument against Bitcoin as they did back in the day anymore. Maybe it's more to do with now the altcoins having to prove themselves. But for the most part, to many people, Bitcoin's already proven itself to be something, and it changed in an incredibly quick pace. So I think it's just patience again is a good thing. But as we start seeing, like Tops is now coming in with Wax, and Wax has made a partnership with Street Fighter, and those game-like elements, and that is coming in, and all of a sudden it'll just be a natural thing. It's just people won't question it in the same sense and vein as they do now, and yeah, I mean, it's an incredible thing. My mom bought Bitcoin. My mom bought Bitcoin.
I guess it's only taken what seven years for normal people to get it. I guess the NFT space has got another 7 years. We're really in the wild west of NFTs still. I guess regulation has to hit us in the face first. But I to answer the question from my point of view, Uranus, is I think with the BAE, that's what I always set out to do, was try and draw the normal art world in. But I slowly learned that it's hard, and you need to prove it first. And I think, to their complete credit, I think that whether they wash trade or not, I think that Super Rare is doing a fantastic job of proving that this is a valuable space, and they're actually doing all of us a benefit in the space. By showing that, you know, this is a place where you can make money, this is a place that artists can make money, and I think that's good. But I still feel that the same problem lies in artists believing and people saying, oh, this is just magic money and it doesn't make sense, and they can't get their head around, you know, like you said, people have accepted Bitcoin, but now we're telling them to accept Ethereum, which to a lot of people really sounds like something from a video game. It's like the name doesn't do it any help, and especially Ether, you know, it's from the Ether. All of my artwork is in the Ether. I think that it's going to take, like you said, another... When did Ethereum launch? 2015. It's probably going to take another 2 to 3 years before people accept Ethereum, and then another 4 years from that point before people really accept NFTs. And we're going to have platforms moon and go down in between then and now. But I really think we're just at the start of this. And
the unfortunate quickening of the pace, I think, will come with the crisis of the monetary system in the first world. I mean, it's already upon us in so many different kinds of ways, but it's not really hit in a sense that it's so tangible to people that they would really be incentivized to learn what money is to begin with. I mean, it's incredibly easy to get into crypto if you know what's wrong with the legacy system. And then you'll be able to be tempered, and it does take a while. I mean, it took me 3 years to get comfortable to a degree in the space. I mean, it's horrible being a noob on anything, but it's in particularly dangerous when you have a volatile money space and all of these different kind of concepts. But I think it's the footing of everything. Like, for example, like when I get into a basic conversation about Bitcoin with someone, and they go like, oh, it went high and then it crashed and then it died. I said, well, hold on a minute. Okay, so it crashed from the all-time high. As with all markets, you have all-time highs. But if you evaluate the 11 years with all-time lows, look at what the lows are. They started from $0, then went to $1, then crashed, and now the low is hanging about 10,000. So it came in 10 years from 0 to 10,000. Or above, and very likely with the next bull run, it's predictable that it's gonna peak, and maybe who knows what the hell it can be this time, but then it's going to probably crash back down again to something like 25 grand or 30 grand or whatever, and then we'll have the same cyclical argument because it went high and then it came back. No, again, look at the fucking all-time low. Jesus Christ.
Like, I got into it, it was either 2013, 2014, it was just after the Mt. Gox crash, and it was just after it hit its first peak of $1,000, and I mean, obviously pattern recognition means nothing, but it went from $1,000 to $100. This time it went from 20,000. I mean, what did it hit? Like 5,000. So maybe the next run is going to be 100 grand down to almost 10 or 20. It could be that drastic each time. The percentages, roughly line up. So and like a lot of people could lose their ass. But apparently,
and will. Of course they will.
Yeah. apparently 95%, and I could be wrong about this, but apparently something like 95% of people who have ever invested in Bitcoin are up, which is an impressive number. So I think, taking that into account, I think that crypto art might be quite similar.
It's just like it's just one of those things. It's like there's this one guy who blew my mind in so many different ways. I'm not going to say his name, but he's part of one big conference, and he's a 17-year-old kid. He wasn't allowed to go to his own after party of a millions of dollars of a conference, and basically because he was a gamer and he started accepting Bitcoin very early in games, then all of a sudden he's a multi-millionaire. And he's so there's these stories when you come and learn and be with people all of a sudden who've truly changed their lives and they're doing incredible things, and it sounds almost too good to be true, and a lot of the time in the world most things that sound like that actually are. But if you don't have the perspective of the whole evolution of money from where it was born, how it evolved, and where it's now and what this thing is, it's easy to think such a thing. And this is the whole thing about education and knowing, for example, when we were talking about politics earlier, is that when I came out of school, it was very, very obvious in many tangible ways that I felt inside of me that Nazis were wrong and they were horrible people. Everything to do with them should be frowned upon.
On this live stream.
And then, but at the same time, I had to be in my adulthood before I learned that in communist totalitarian regimes, they kill 10 times the amount of people.
And I think I recently finished reading the Gulag Archipelago, and it changed my... I think anyone out there should definitely read it. It changed my entire perception of the Second World War. It's really not as simple as Nazis bad, everyone else good. It's everyone made mistakes, everyone did awful things. I mean, one of the stories that stuck out in my mind was the British and the Americans actually, after the war was over, the Soviets who fought with us, Stalin signed a decree that said all Russians must be returned to Russia. And we were so obsessed with the idea that because they fought the Nazis with us, they must be the good guys. So we tricked a lot of soldiers who fought with us into going back to Russia. And during the story, you'd have to read the book to really get into it, but during the story, some of the men threw themselves under tanks, jumped off bridges because they knew what they were returning to. And we, the English and the Americans, we assumed that we were doing the right thing by sending them back. And I think that that whole point in history is so complicated. And that book, the Gulag Archipelago, it shows more than just the evils of one side or another. It really paints the entire time as grey, and I think that's what we miss today is we miss the greyness of what it was. No one individuals were purely evil, but no one nation was purely evil. No one nation was purely good. Everyone made mistakes and everyone did bad things.
But that's what I meant to say about that is what the modern relevance is. And I think our central banking system and the whole inflationary what's happened to money and how the system operates right now, that'll probably be looked at in a similar kind of lens as what we now look at the Second World War with, and how people weren't educated about how the monetary system works, or they weren't able to be fiscally responsible in the face of a massive machine that was just an unspeakable evil almost. Yeah. Like and that's quite a lot to say, but it happens to be true, unfortunately. And
yeah. No,
what can you do?
I think people don't like to see the grey in all things, but we've got seriously off topic here. But it's been a really
for sure. but hey, at the same time, when the art world all of a sudden, when it's all only about certain, like I suppose in one way it's about social causes, or then rocks on stands or whatever it is. I think this is the big thing about art. It should be relevant to everything that is going on, what's going on in the past, and constructing the future. Art should be a medium of exploring the world, and in a tangible kind of way. And I love these conversations, dangerous as they or trepidous as they might be in a certain kind of sense, even because for those people who are not in the inner circle talking about art, if one of those people hears this conversation where artists and curators and people are talking about the biggest, most important movements and exploring the areas of gray that the world is, trying to be relevant, trying to, as a slice of the pie, as art trying to be a part of the bigger whole, that's why art can ever be valuable. I hate the whole lines and circles and this and that, and then some pretentious guy with a glass of red wine analyzing the circle and the intersection of the triangle. Fuck off. And it's not only to say that abstract art, like I love abstract art.
No, I
make
actually,
it.
I lampoon it a lot, but I really like minimalism as well. But I do think it's nonsense at the same time.
there's a way of making communications impactful or not, but that's the like I want art to contend with these big ideas. That's if Guernica has any value, it's because it was made at a time when it was hard to make, and it was about a topic that was difficult to discuss, and it was an artist trying to go beyond his limits of what was possible at the time, and that time stamped in history. Doing the hard thing at a hard time is, I think maybe if there's a final thought, that would be that the commercial interest and the art interest, and you knowing this very well, being in crypto art, is that it has an element of danger to it. It definitely, the commercial interest, the platform interest, the sort of control issues of some people, they would like to wash crypto art as they're doing right now, it being into these, whatever grotesque things or eyes popping out or having nothing to do with the movement or nothing to do with these big ideas. And while they're very good and great, and all expressions are free, but that's to me not crypto art. That is not just utilizing the technology itself is not enough in order for you to call yourself a crypto artist in my eyes. Of course, people are going to do whatever the hell that they want, but it's a total thing altogether, and it has an element of danger. And if it has an element of danger, it has a higher possibility that it holds value from the collector point of view as well. So I think they need courage. The collectors as well need courage. They need to be able to withstand some things that are a little bit of heat in order to get to the value of this space. So everyone's courage is necessary in order for the success to happen. And if you're only doing the easy thing, then very in likelihood you're buying sugar and there's going to be a crash.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. And we've plugged everything. I think that's a really nice place to finish it. So unless anyone puts in a question in the next kind of two minutes or so, we're probably going to end it there.
I'll answer on Twitter. I don't want to take anyone's time anymore.
All right, but no, thank you all so much for watching. I'm really happy that so many of you watched it all the way through. It's been a pleasure, as always, VESA. I love speaking with you. And yeah, please share and like this, share it around. We'll be putting out clips, and subscribe for more. We've got another interview coming this week with an artist called Aaron, who used to work for Vice and create comic books for them. And then next week we're having Tom Badley come back, and anyone else who really wants to come on the stream and do one with me, I'm 100% down. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.